Hey Alpha Males, I thought it would be a good throwback to do one of the very, very early episodes in Alpha Male Podcast, Great Warriors in History. I hope that you can bear with some of the lesser audio quality and hopefully over the many years, by God's grace, become a better orator. So, hopefully you can overlook that stuff and enjoy the content, Great Warriors in History. Here on Alpha Male Podcast, where we talk about what it means to be a man the right way, with God at the center, Judeo-Christian values. With that,
today we're going to talk about famous warriors throughout history. Now, I don't think anybody will disagree that there's a strong correlation between who we view in our culture as an alpha male and great warriors. And I think it's been the same through all great societies throughout history. Now, disclaimer, I'm not a professional historian. If I mispronounce something or get some detail wrong, please keep that in mind. And I think you'll find that the overarching theme of this and the main points of this will be true. Now, think of all the great warriors throughout history. I was thinking about this the other day, and I realized there was a lot of striking similarities. Some that are pretty obvious and some that you may not think of. But when I was thinking of great warriors throughout history, here's the ones that I came up with. And this is not all of them. This is just the ones that seem most prevalent. The Knights and the Crusaders. The Romans, the Legionnaires. The barbarian tribes, such as the Vikings and the Celts and the Franks. I'm going to lump those all together. The Samurai. The Spartans, the Zulu, and today's modern Navy SEALs, Special Forces, Delta Force, those Special Forces guys. Great warriors throughout history. Now, if I didn't mention your favorite, don't get all bent out of shape. Just go to iTunes or Spreaker or whatever you're listening to this on and leave it in the comments. But those are the ones that I picked, and we'll dive into those a little bit. Look at what they all have in common. Let's go first to the Knights and the Crusaders. Now, this is a big swath of history, and it encompasses many countries. We tend to think of English knights, but there were German knights and French knights, and knights from pretty much all over Europe, and even places like Burgundy and things like that we don't even have anymore. So it's a big, broad spectrum, but obviously, we're just going a quick overview because this could be, we could do a whole podcast on just knights and just one aspect of that. But when we think of knights, let's look a little bit of how knights became what they are. Now, generally, a knight started his training as a squire at a young age, 12 or 14. They're initially in charge of just doing fairly menial tasks, taking care of a knight's armor, taking care of the horse, learning how to take care and polish equipment, maintain things. As they progressed, they became more instructed by their mentor, by the knight that took them under their wing. Taught them skills, taught them proficiencies in different weapons and horseback riding and all the aspects of being a knight. Things that you would obviously think of as being a knight, like how to joust, how to ride a horse, but also things that you wouldn't think of. They were also taught poetry. Of course, when we think of knights, we think of the code of chivalry. Now, obviously, there's many different versions of this. I'm going to read one version that I found, Code of Chivalry. We all think of chivalry when we think of knights. Nobility of service, death before dishonor. Obedience to rule, respect for all worthy people. Command obedience through respect. Scorn those who are ignoble, protect the innocent, punish the guilty, courtesy to all ladies. Battle, the test of knighthood, combat is glory. Defend your charge unto death, war is the flowering of chivalry. Arts are the food of the chivalrous. Anger binds and cool heads win the day. Now, these squires were brought in from a very early age, and they learned all these aspects of combat and poetry and nobility and honor and training, strength training, acrobat training, all kinds of training they learned for years and years to get to become a knight. They learned to honor those above them. They became experts in their field. Close your eyes and think of a knight. What came to mind? Probably a man standing there in armor with whatever weapon, a sword, a shield. They were weapons experts. They were self-disciplined. They were organized. They had a very rigorous training regimen. I think you'll find this when we look at all great warriors throughout history. Let's jump to the complete other end of the globe. Let's go to Japan. Look at the samurai. Now, samurai also started from a very early age. Their very first training was from their parents. They learned how to be respectful. They learned not to complain. They learned how to sit and how to eat politely. They did not use what they called peasant talk. They were a noble class. They spoke in a different manner, with respect, not complaining, not grumbling. As they progressed in their training, obviously, they started more into the martial combats, the martial arts, obviously. And now, do the same thing with the samurai when you close your eyes. What do you think about? Probably a man with a samurai sword. But they were also skilled in many weapons. I didn't know this until I did research for this podcast, but they started out as horse archers, not as sword specialists. But they continued that tradition. They were skilled in many weapons, not just the katana, not just their sword. And they also had a code of chivalry, although they called it Bushido. Now here are some of the tenets of Bushido via the internet, so keep that in mind. Justice, bravery, benevolence, veracity, politeness, honor, and loyalty. You're starting to see a correlation there, even though these were hundreds of years apart, thousands of miles away, completely different isolated cultures. Their warriors share many of the same aspects. They learned respect and honor. They honored those above them. They learned politeness. They learned nobility and bravery. They became weapons experts. They went through years and years of training, strength training, mental training. They also had mentorships. They were also brought up by the more experienced warriors and taught in the ways, both mentally and physically. Let's go back the other direction to the Greeks, the Spartans. Now, I don't know the numbers for sure. I'm just speculating on this, but I imagine if you took a poll and asked people's opinion of the greatest warriors in history, the Spartans would at least be in the top 3, if not the top 1. Now, Spartans also in their warrior culture, they started their training at a young age, even younger, at the age of 7. From a very young age, they were put into a harsh life. They were taught skills such as scholastics, also obviously warfare, stealth, hunting, and athletics. They were sent out almost completely naked into the wilderness. Here's a little bit difference between them and the others. They had a little bit different version of honor. They were encouraged to steal but not get caught, and to murder slaves but not get caught at that either. Their code, their learning had just like the chivalry code and Bushido, they had a gogi, involved school subjects like reading and writing, arithmetic, and poetry. They were taught how to withstand hardships like cold, hunger, and pain. If the boys showed signs of cowardice or timidity, or being timid, they were punished even more. So like you would expect, very rigorous training, emphasis on being physically tough, but also in there, very important, they were taught other things like poetry, like reading and writing. Obviously that was important even for a warrior. Now in the Spartan life, They didn't do any of the craftsmanship, any of the farming, any of that stuff. That was all done by their slaves, by their lower class, by their less than Spartan, in their eyes, people. They were just warriors. Still, they learned reading and writing and poetry and those things. Obviously, the Spartans felt that an important part, which I found surprising, to being a great warrior. And we've seen that in the other ones we've looked at so far. Now, what do we think of when we think of a Spartan warrior? Go ahead and close your eyes. Think about a Spartan warrior. Probably a very strong masculine man with a shield, perhaps a sword, probably a spear, more common. Very physically fit, very tough, great fighters. Let's look at another one. Let's look at the Zulu. Now, these might be not one that made your list, but the one that makes mine. I've always, ever since I learned about him, had a great respect for the Zulu. A little bit later in history, they were still kind of stuck in the Stone Age, a tribal African warfare. Yet these warriors took on the British and the Boers, the Dutch at the time, in their part of Africa, who at that time had center fire, fairly modern rifles. And they took them on with spears and cowhide shields, and they had many great victories. Although eventually defeated and pushed back by the Western civilization, by the great advancement in weapons technology, they held their own for quite a while. And they, in my opinion, are some of the greatest warriors, especially considering what they had to deal with. Now, the Zulus, especially under Shaka Zulu, had some crazy rough training, probably rivaling that of the Spartans. They were discouraged from wearing shoes, and they would toughen up their feet by dancing and running on thorns. Not like greenbriers like what you might have back east in the United States, but like legit big, thick, like when you would think of Jesus' crown of thorns. Like those big, thick thorns. They would jump on those and dance on those to toughen their feet up. They trained so that they could run 50 miles in a day to get to a battle. They also required to have great discipline. Now, I don't have as much information on these guys or the Vikings and things like that, because although they had records, they didn't have the great written records like the Greeks and obviously the Knights and things like that had. So, but we know they had great discipline. They know they were very physically fit. We know that they were masters with their weapons, which was a shield and a spear. We know from their greatest leader, Shaka Zulu, that he was a very smart, brilliant man and tactician. So, obviously mental smarts there as well. And jumping over again to back where we started in Europe, talking about the Vikings and what the Romans called, because they were fighting them, barbarians. They considered them that because they didn't really understand how they operated. And we don't have the amount of records either because they were destroyed or they had most of their traditions passed down orally at the time. We think of them as savage and undisciplined, but they were great navigators, which you don't get from being stupid. You don't circumnavigate, continents being stupid. You don't have great craftsmen that build those kind of long ships, and they were some of the best metallurgists of Europe at the time. Great goldsmiths and ironsmiths. You don't get that from being stupid. So they obviously, although we consider them barbarians and savages, they had great discipline. They must have had great organizational skills, even if it was more tribal in nature. When you think of a Viking, you might conjure up images of some violent savage, which, to be fair, they may have been, but they also were greatly disciplined. They also had great tribal leadership, and they honored their leaders. They had great respect for their leaders, had great respect and honor in their communities. We also think of them as great experts with their weapons, too. Things like the axe, the battle axe. the long ship, the Viking shields. Now let's go ahead to modern times, today's times. Who do we think of as the best warriors? There'll be a great debate about this, I'm sure. But obviously the Navy SEALs make the list, Delta Force, any kind of special forces, Green Berets, things like that. Now think about those guys. Close your eyes for a second and think about what comes to mind when you think about today's elite warriors. Probably see a guy standing there with an M4, probably a Beretta and a holster, body armor, modern body armor, a helmet, all kinds of tactical gear. Obviously very strong, physically fit. And a lot of people don't think about this, but Special Forces training, and I'm not a Navy SEAL and I don't pretend to be one, never have been, or Delta Force or anything like that. But I know for a fact these guys are not stupid guys. We think of them as like big stupid brutes maybe, but they're not. You have to be fairly smart. You have to have a fairly high GT score, an ASVAB score, which is a test you take to get into the military, to be selected for this kind of stuff. Battlefield communications. Many of them are required to learn multiple languages. This isn't a stupid man's game. These guys aren't big stupid jocks. They're very intelligent. Very high IQs. Obviously, they're very organized, very disciplined. Obviously, I don't think anybody would argue that. Very self-disciplined and have great respect for authority. These men also, great weapons experts. I mean, you think of them as crack shots with the M4, with a pistol, with a machine gun, with whatever weapon system they're given. And that's true. So, talking about all these great warriors in history, what can we glean from that? How can we use this to benefit us as men? Well, let's look at some overarching things that they all share. Obviously, I don't think we can call it a coincidence that they all had very rigorous training. And we often think of, when we think of like a montage in a movie of like somebody becoming special forces or somebody becoming a Spartan, like it's just something they do in the beginning as a rite. And that is true. But any true warrior will tell you, any special forces guy, any general, foot soldier will tell you that training is continuous. Between battles, between fights, you're training. Training is very important. Now, as I said in the beginning, I'm a professional trainer, professional firearms instructor, and I'm very blessed to do that. But even myself as a trainer, I'm a constant student. I'm constantly getting training. Who knows how many thousands of times I pull a trigger. Those skills are perishable. Any warrior skill is perishable. Most life skills are perishable. It requires constant training. You'll see very rigorous training with any of the warriors throughout history. So let's look at that. Whatever your life is, whatever you do, how can you train yourself to be better? Either to achieve a goal or to stay on top once you're there. Sharpen those skills, whatever those skills are. I don't care if you're an accountant. I'm not an accountant. I, quite frankly, would not like to do that at all. But if that's what you are, whatever kind of training you can get to be a better accountant and to stay on top. Whatever that is, whatever that life skill is. Look at the man you want to be, that you want to become, and what kind of training that requires. Seek that training. Be that continual student. Even when you're a teacher, be that student. Undergo that training. Don't wait for it to just happen. If you're not getting the training you need, seek it out on your own. We live in a world where one of the most valuable things you can have, information, is free. Now, I'm in my 30s. You think back to when I was a boy. If you're a little bit younger, you probably won't realize this, but if you're my age or older, you will. When I wanted to learn about something, I had to go to the library and go to something called a card catalog in the Dewey Decimal System and look it up. And then take a card out and go scour aisles and try and find a book on it and see if that book was any good. If I wanted to learn about archery, I remember going to the library, finding a card, going to a certain section, seeing what books I could find about archery, and then looking in the table of contents, looking those up, figuring out what part of that I wanted to learn, and then looking that up in the book. A very laborious process. Nowadays, if I want to learn proper finger placement and finger control for traditional archery, I can get on freaking YouTube, and in 5 minutes I can have 3 videos, the top 3 pull up, and I can look at them for a second, see if that guy is a good teacher and that's what I want to learn, see if he seems to know what he's talking about. The wealth of information that's free now today and readily available on a phone in your pocket is mind-blowing. Don't wait for somebody else to give you that training. Knowledge, one of the most valuable things in life in today's age, is freer and greater access than we've ever had it. Don't let that slip through your fingers. One of the other great things I noticed about this, since we're on the topic of knowledge, they didn't just, even though they were great warriors and remembered for being very strong and physically fit and, men of brawn and sweat, all of them emphasized, at least all the ones that I could find information on, emphasized intellectualism. Things like poetry. When you think of a knight, you may not think about poetry. When you think of a samurai or a Spartan, you may not think about poetry. And to be honest, I like my Edgar Allan Poe and things like that, but, I don't honestly seek out poetry or things like that. But I do like fine art. I do like paintings and things like that. I don't know if that's a personality thing that goes along with being a warrior. You see so much brutality, you appreciate the finer things in life, and you kind of gives you that balance. But I certainly see that to be true in my life. You see so many dead bodies, and you kind of want to look at a beautiful oil painting, and it kind of evens you out. And I enjoy that. I enjoy going to art museums. I seek that stuff out. And all these great warriors on this list, all those cultures, all that training included some kind of fine art. They emphasized beauty and intellectualism. Don't pass that over. To be honest, got rid of my TV several years ago, and one of the best things I ever did. But I'm not anti-TV. And rest is a very important thing. And relaxation. And hobbies. But think about how you're spending that time in front of that TV. Are you watching TV that's going to make you more intellectual, that's filled with beauty and fine art? Are you watching documentary on wildlife, which would be great? Or are you watching reality TV? You could spend an hour in front of the TV watching Jerry Springer, or whatever the nowadays equivalent of that is. Or you could spend an hour in front of the TV watching a BBC documentary on the Cold War. Which one of those things is more beneficial? Time is a finite thing. Now, of course, I'm a Christian, and I believe that I'll live forever. But as far as it goes on this earth and this body, in this age, every moment that passes, I have less time than I had before. That time slips away, and it doesn't go backwards. Think about that, and think about how you're spending your time. I'm not saying you have to do this constantly, but think about that. Could this time be better spent doing some kind of training, doing some kind of learning, either physically or intellectually or spiritually, something that benefits, other than something that's just passing time away? Isn't it amazing? One of the most valuable things that we have, time. And it's one of the things we most easily waste. I'm not perfect at this. I waste time too. But this life is the only one you get on this earth. And like I said, every moment that passes, that time is slipping away. Try and use it to be beneficial. Seek out that training. Seek out that intellectualism. Here's one that's going to sting me. All these great warriors, very organized. As units and individually. Very organized individuals. I'm not the most organized guy. A lot of times you go into my room and it looks like a bomb went off. Some things I am very organized about, like when I clean a gun, that thing is spotless because I'm going to trust my life to it. My equipment goes back in the same place all the time. I'm pretty meticulous about that because I've seen what can happen when it doesn't. But organization is a skill that I personally need to work on. But you'll notice that from most successful people, not just warriors, organization. That's an overarching theme. So think about that. Another thing I noticed, I Obviously, when we think about these great warriors, they were all experts with their weapons. Now, people think of I'm going to use Navy SEALs because they're modern day, and I have the most similarities with them as far as equipment goes. But you think of some Navy SEAL as being some great shot, and they are. But they're not born that way. A lot of times when I teach a new shooter, especially, it's way easier on average to teach a woman than a man. Because men have this thing that they're men, so that when they pick up a gun, they must know how to use it. They must be a good shooter, and if not, it makes them less of a man. Shooting is not something you're born knowing how to do. You might be gifted to be naturally better at it, but any great shooter will tell you it takes a lot of time and training. It takes a lot to become an expert, especially with a pistol. It takes thousands and thousands of dry practices of, taking the gun out of the holster the same way every time, day and night. And it takes a lot of practice to stay that way. It's not like you just learn it and then you don't ever have to practice it again. That takes a lot. And I don't have any really experience with a sword, but I imagine it's as much or more so with a sword, with a shield, that kind of training, that kind of fencing, to get to that level where you're confident in battle, where you're an expert with a sword. Now, if you're a warrior, great, then it applies just easily. If you're not a warrior, you can still apply this to your own life. Whatever your weapons are, be proficient with them. It doesn't have to be a melee weapon. It doesn't have to be something that sheds blood. Whatever your weapon is, be proficient with it. If it's a MacBook Pro, if that's your main thing you use to get your job done. If you're a whatever equivalent warrior is in the technology sector, do you know your equipment? Are you an expert at it? If not, how can you get that way? You can have the best equipment in the world, but if you're not a master of it, it's not so important. Be an expert with the equipment that you're required of in life. Think about this. You don't even have to have the best equipment. Experience and being an expert at something makes up for a lot. Think about if I take that Navy SEAL and I take him to a pawn shop and I get him a police trade-in Glock 17, which is your basic model Glock, brand new, $550, $600. Get a old used beat up one for $300. Okay, very basic weapon. If you don't know anything about guns or handguns, $350, very crude but reliable weapon. Then I'd take some guy off the street, maybe shot a little bit, but by far maybe shoots once or twice a year, which is what most recreational shooters will do. Okay, and I give him a $3,000 tricked out Wilson Combat Nighthawk Custom 1911. If you don't know anything about guns, just a really top of the line, great smooth handgun. Nobody's going to argue that old beat up gun is better than that new one. Okay, obviously a more elegant, refined weapon, more expensive. If I put those two in a gunfight, who do you think is going to come out on top? The Navy SEAL, because training is far more important than the equipment. Equipment is important, but you got to be an expert with it. So don't make excuses that you don't have good enough this or good enough that. Train with what you have. Master what you have. And then when you get something better, you'll be that much better. Another big theme is honor and respect. Anybody in the military will tell you from your very first day stepping off the bus, and I went to Marine Corps boot camp, and I'm sure it's the same for the other boot camps, you were taught respect and honor for those above you very early on. You are taught not to complain and to do what you're told. You're taught very early on not to make excuses. And I saw that when I researched the training for all of these great warriors throughout history. The samurai and the Spartans mentioned it like verbatim. They were not allowed to complain or grumble or make excuses. Apply that to your own life. No matter what you think about your boss, Think about if I took two identical twins equally good at their job and put them in two identical companies. I know that's not possible, but let's just pretend in this pretend universe that it is. I take two identical twins equally good at their job and I put them in two identical, same size companies, same position, and exactly the same identical twin bosses. And the one is always saying how his boss is not as smart as him, not as good as him, he can do it better, always complaining about the job he has to do, always saying that he doesn't have the right equipment. And the other one, and the other company, does what he's told, no matter what he thinks. He has self-discipline, he does what he's told. He doesn't complain when he's given a job, he does it. He might not have the best equipment he's got the same as the other guy. He could have better equipment, it would be nice, but he does the best he can with the job that he has. Doesn't speak bad about the boss. When the boss says something, it's yes or no, sir. If he has a disagreement and he really knows something wrong, he brings it up respectfully and shows honor and respect to that boss. Even if they're both equally good at their jobs, come back 10 years later, who do you think's gotten promoted? Who do you think's in a higher position in that company? Even if they both are crunching the same numbers and get the same results, who do you think is going to be better off in life? Now, don't take this the wrong way. If you need help, seek help. If you need advice, seek advice. But wasting that time that's so valuable that we talked about, grumbling and complaining, especially about things that you can't change. Not only is it a waste of time, but it skews your worldview, makes you jaded. All these warriors, they did the best they could with what they had. Even when they were defeated in battle, you don't have any great recordings of them complaining or griping or turning around and going home. If they had, they wouldn't be remembered as the greatest warriors. All the training that we read about, whether it's walking on thorns barefooted or being beaten like the Spartan children, or walking miles and miles on foot beside a horse carrying armor like the squires of the knights, they all withstood hardships. Getting through those times is part of life. As any man. As much as you can, try and get through them without the grumbling and complaining. So in conclusion, let's look at some of the great warriors throughout history, and let's use their success to build our success, to be that man, to be that alpha male. Thank you for listening to this edition of the Alpha Male Podcast. Like I said, if you have any disagreements, if you have anything that I forgot, I left out, if you think such and such were the greatest warriors in history and I didn't mention them, or I didn't go over this aspect, or this is another thing that they all share, please, by all means. Like I said, I don't have a master's degree in ancient Japanese culture, okay? So there's probably a lot of stuff that I missed. Please, for the benefit of me and the benefit of everybody else listening, the best way is to write a review on iTunes or Spreaker or whatever else you're listening to this on, and leave that review and put in the comments, hey, I think you left out these guys, they were great, or hey, you got this wrong. I can take criticism. I'm a grown man. So by all means, leave it in there, either praise or criticism. I welcome it. So like I said, the best way for you to do that and for everybody to see it is to leave a review. And I hope that you do that, and I hope that you tune in to the next episode of the Alpha Male Podcast. I don't know if it'll be the next episode or maybe one in the future. I kind of want to do some guests of some other alpha males and do an episode of the manliest movies, what we think of as the manliest movies and what they are. So start thinking about that so you can have those in mind and see what yours are. But that'll hopefully be the next episode, or if I can't get people together, an episode after that. Thanks for tuning in. Have a blessed day.